يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. إنا عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. ليعذب الله المنافقين والمنافقات والمشركين والمشركات ويتوب الله على المؤمنين والمؤمنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to today's session of All You Will Believe. My name is Marima Kiyemi and I'll be your anchor on today's session. I welcome you all by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin, I'd like to make a few announcements. Please invite your friends and families and loved ones to join us by sharing the link. The community is richly blessed by the birth of children to the Abdul Malik, Salau, Dabere, Hassan, Bello, Opolu, and Akipeju families over the past 2 weeks. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes these additions eternal sources of joy to the families and the Ummah at large. Ameen. Thanks for the belief and continuous support towards the Man UK Rebuild project. The pledges are gradually being fulfilled. You can also put something into the account today and be greatly rewarded. Be part of the next fundraising holding at Broadway Academy in Birmingham City on December 13th, inshallah. Special thanks to NIMAB and NIMAC, our sister organizations. The Corridor Hassana interest-free loan campaign is still on. Please invest in our mosque rebuild project and get rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your money will get refunded on schedule. For more details, please contact the President, Honorable Abdul Jalil, Professor Badrin, or Imam Tajuddin Salami. This is to invite our youth to the Man Youth December camp starting 22nd of December. There are lots of fun and benefits awaiting you. Details are already sent on the General Man UK platform and more shall be provided by the Shura next week, inshallah. We need volunteers to be part of the mosque bucket collection team. Kindly contact Al-Haji Abdurrahman Amode. Please join Man UK today. The elders group is for the ages of 50 and above. Join the CAF sisters to recite Surah Al-Kahf and other selected prayers every Friday. We also have the Man sisters for our younger mothers. Allow Latif brothers especially for middle-aged men, and Man Youth is open to all our brothers, our young brothers and sisters. There is something for everyone at Muslim Association of Nigeria UK. Enroll your kids at Man UK Markers while the slots are still available. Contact Dr. Musa Abdurrahim, the head of Markers, or Al-Hajja Muinat Koka, the education officer. I will now start with the Quran recitation by Abdul Salam Olawore. Abdul Salam, are you there?
Absalam, if you are there, please click on the hand raise button so we can bring you up. Because I can't identify you or by your name. Your name is not showing up. So please, all right, perfect. Thank you. Where are you? So accept being promoted to panelist. Absalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Should I start? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في الخلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر أو ترى من فتور ثم رجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاشعا وهو الحسير ولقد زينا السماء بالدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها هجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لكم عذاب السير وللذين كفروا من ربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع ونعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسوقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنهم عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور أم أمنتم ما في السماء أن يكشف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم ما في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبله فكيف كان نذير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبض ما يمسكون إلا الرحمن إن الله بكل شيء بصير آمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور آمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتوه ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم من في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقول متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا النذير المبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غيرا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين
Barakallahu Fiqh. Thank you so much for the recitation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all those who listened as well. I will now hand over to our father, grandfather, Professor Moshood Badiri. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Maryam, thank you. Jazakumullah khairan for starting us off. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. We thank Almighty Allah for giving us the opportunity to be on this program today, O ye who believe. We thank Him for all His mercies, and we continue to ask for His favors. Today we have a special guest who will be speaking to us on a very important, issue. You know, a lot of the time we want to emphasize that this platform is a community platform. So whatever will benefit us, we try to bring it to the community. So we have Dr. Anand Odedra, who is a malaria specialist. He's a consultant in infectious diseases and microbiology at Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Trust. We'll be speaking to us today. The title is quite intriguing. It says, Traveling to Nigeria, Rethink Malaria and Protect Yourself. And there's a religious dimension to this. You know, in Islam, you'll be interested to know that there's emphasis on looking after our health. Without good health, we cannot perform all our ibadats. You need good health to perform your ibadat. Look at Ramadan, for example. Allah says we should fast, but a person who is not healthy is not able to fast. This is why Allah says that Man kana minkum maridan aw ala safar. Any one of you who is ill has to live fasting. Look at Hajj. If you want to go to Hajj, man istata'a ilayhi sabila. Allah says anyone who is able to, including health. Even salawat, even the prayers that we do 5 times a day, you need good health to be able to do it. But a lot of the time we take our health for granted. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith. He said, Ni'matan, there are 2 favors which Allah, provides for human beings. Maghbunun fihi ma kathiru minan nas. Many people take it for granted. He said there are 2 important, favors of Allah, which many people take for granted. The first one, he said, as-sihha, health, good health. And the other one is firag, that is your free time. A lot of people take it for granted. So it's very, very important for us to appreciate the need to look after our health. So we are really thankful to our guest today, Dr. Anand Odedra, for his time. We pray that Allah will count this as an act of good deed for you. We all know malaria. Anybody who is from Nigeria knows, the problem of malaria. So inshallah, we'll give, Dr. Anand Odedra 25 minutes. He'll be speaking for 25 minutes at most. The important aspect of this platform is it gives opportunity for people to ask questions. Actually, through the questions, we learn a little bit more. So after the presentation, inshallah, we'll be able to ask questions. So I will give the platform now to Dr. Odedra to give us his presentation. You are most welcome. Bismillah.
Thank you. And assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
And thank you very much to Mariam for inviting me, and thank you, Professor Badruddin, as well, for your kind introduction. And I echo your words, and I think I want to emphasize is that this is about, as you said, it's about health, so that you remain healthy. And we're not trying to discourage anyone at all from traveling. And in fact, I very much encourage travel to all over. I think it's extremely enriching, particularly to one's roots. So this is not in any way a discouragement. It's just that we want you to remain healthy, as Professor Badrin, rightly said, and enjoy your trip and come back healthy. Um, to see if I can share my screen. Um, uh, and can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm not sure how it's normally moderated, but I'm more than happy to take questions as we go along. And if anyone can flag them or let me know. Obviously, this is all for the benefit of the audience, and so do feel free. And apologies to those who heard a bit about this on Sunday. There might be a little bit of repetition, but hopefully I'll move on. So I'm a consultant in infectious disease and microbiology at Lewisham and Greenwich Trust. I'm also a malaria researcher, and I did my PhD in malaria in Australia a number of years ago. And then after coming back from Australia, I transferred from my training in Sheffield to London. And because I was a transfer, I was essentially placed where no one else wanted to go, which was Woolwich Hospital, so Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Woolwich. And when I arrived, I was seeing malaria almost every day. And I was wondering, the sort of experience of like, wow, I'm seeing so much cases having just done a PhD in Australia. And that was one of the reasons I decided to take a job in Lewisham and Greenwich and reached out to people, to Mariam, for example, to try and talk about why we see so much and what we can do to try and keep the population healthy and malaria free as much as possible. So the first question I ask is, and again, has anyone ever traveled to Africa, Asia, South America? I know this is primarily about Nigeria today, and not taken malaria tablets. And I start by saying, put my own hand up. And when I was younger, I went to India. My parents, when malaria was a bigger risk, did not take anti-malarials, and my brother got malaria. And obviously, my parents cared very much about me. So there obviously was a misconception about the risks there, and that's what we're trying to. As much I am trying to educate, I'm also trying to understand from your side, what is the problem? Do we think there's a problem with that? Firstly, um, why do we think that people don't take malaria tablets? And I heard some reasons on Sunday, particularly and around, um, we're from there. Also trying to get a hold of tablets and the cost as well, amongst other things. But I'm also all ears about any other potential problems or barriers that we might have, and then what can we do about it? And which when we open the floor up, that will be one of the things I want to learn. So very briefly, I think everyone's very aware that malaria is spread by this mosquito. So this mosquito is known the Anopheles mosquito. You can see it when you travel. It stands in a diagonal like this, and that's how you know it's Anopheles. And one of the reasons why there's so much malaria, particularly in South Africa and particularly in Nigeria, is that you not only do you have a lot of this mosquito, it loves the environment, the hot environment, but also the type of mosquito, Anopheles mosquitoes that's there, is very good at spreading malaria. It likes to bite people compared to other mosquitoes. So that's also one of the reasons why there's just so much malaria, particularly in Nigeria, for example. And malaria is a parasite. So it's not a virus or a bacteria. And parasites are much more complicated than viruses and bacteria. And that's why our immune systems don't perhaps react in the same way they might do to a virus. For example, in a virus like measles, when once you get measles, you won't get measles again. With malaria, you often end up getting malaria again because it's a very much more complicated thing than, for example, a virus or a bacteria. And here, these are the most recent kind of published data from the UK Health Association, and you can see that almost about half the cases in the whole of England are just in London. So London is the big hotspot, 10 times as much as Scotland, the whole of Scotland. And if you drill down a bit deeper, and this is the most recent data that I can get a hold of for London, South London, South London is the hotspot of London, and this is the rates. And I think we said on Sunday when we were in Bermondsey that Southwark is the highest rate of malaria cases in the UK, and that's people that have come back from abroad having got malaria from a mosquito bite. And then followed by Greenwich and Lewisham, which is where I work, and that explains a lot about and then Lambeth as well, and you can see the other boroughs. And in terms of, and that does go into real cases as well. So I've just kind of circled the first top three. So these are the top areas for malaria in the country, and possibly even Europe, or in a setting where malaria isn't there all the time. And that really kind of is part of the reason I took up the job, and part of the reason I'm here to talk to you is to try and explain, because I think this also was not, in my experience, is not appreciated even by the people who work in the hospital, by our CEO, by the staff, by the patients, and perhaps it's because I think we've not done a good job in medicine, sort of explaining that and talking to people in the community, and I think that's our fault. So that's one of the reasons I'm here today. And very quickly, so in my hospital, which is Lewisham and Greenwich, we see about more than 100 cases every year, more than 8% just of all the malaria cases in the UK, which I don't think we see any other condition with that high proportion. And again, that reflects our population that we serve. And sadly, we have had people very sick, and unfortunately, people die of malaria in our hospital and hospitals. And that's obviously very sad, because they were well enough to travel on a long flight in the weeks to months leading up to their death. Thankfully, the vast majority of cases, they come, they get diagnosed, they get treated, they go home. Many come in, get diagnosed, and go home on treatment as well. So we try our very best, including myself, to make that experience as pleasant as possible. I try my very best to see the patients myself if I can, talk to them. But we also know that in some cases, people do unfortunately die and are very, very sick. And even if you get malaria and you have a mild form, you'll still be off work, off school. It is very like a very bad flu at best. And then in my hospital, this is what we call anti-malaria prophylaxis or prevention. So this is not to treat malaria once you've got it, is to prevent it from happening. And we looked at our patients and asked them, we looked at the notes and said, how many patients had proper tablets and that prevention of malaria before, and then got malaria in our hospital. And it was only about confirmed about 3.4%. We had some patients that were unknown on the records, they didn't document. Usually in those circumstances, people will tell you that, look, I took tablets and I still got malaria. And this reflects what we expect, how effective the treatments are. They are very, very effective. So if you take down the malaria prophylaxis properly, the chance of getting malaria are very, very low. Not zero. Important to make it clear, not zero. So if you were to even take it perfectly and you come back from Nigeria and you get a fever, you should go to the hospital and be tested. You need to have that. Hopefully it's a very short journey, and a short trip. As best you can make it in A&E, but your chances of getting malaria are much, much less. They are really very good. Sulfadoxine pyrimethamine, some of you may have heard of Fansidar. It's a treatment. It's actually not one that we recommend, or Pro Bono recommend in the UK, but people often acquire it in Africa, as it's used in a different kind of way than we use it here. And we don't recommend using that. So the other thing to make clear is that in our experience in Lewisham and Greenwich, but also this reflects what happens in Southwark and Lambeth, for example, is that not only is it we see a lot of malaria, the species of malaria is the most dangerous one. It's that most of our cases, almost 90%, are the most dangerous species that causes the bad illness and the death. The biggest peak we have is in summer, after the summer holidays, which is when people go and see their friends and relatives, travel, and then come back. And most of our patients, majority are from West Africa. We've come back from West Africa, and our biggest cohort is Nigeria. So 60% have come back from Nigeria. So I'm very proud, very happy, and very pleased to be talking to yourselves today. And then one of the things is and this kind of the question of what we often see is people who have grown up in the area have and traveled and not taken tablets for malaria and then come back with malaria. And I think sometimes we haven't done not done a good job in explaining what the risks are. And that's because what happens is your immunity to malaria goes away. This graph is going to show a little bit about what malaria immunity looks like. So what you have on the bottom, so represents an area where there's lots of malaria, like Nigeria, for example. And if you were born there and you grew up there, so you have how old you are in years there, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then the probability of getting this outcome. So the first probability, the blue line, is severe malaria. So this is the chance of getting severe malaria. And you can see that when you're very young, the chance of getting very severe malaria and dying, unfortunately, are very high. And it happens when you're very, very young. And this reflects the fact that most of the deaths in malaria, about 600,000 every year, are only young children, so children under the age of 5. So what happens is, unfortunately, young children die, or they get better and they start to develop immunity to malaria. So what that looks like is the chances of getting severe malaria start to become lower and lower and lower, and almost disappear. And then what happens is you get this thing called clinical malaria. So that's the red dot dash line. And you're not, as you get older, you still get sick with malaria. You get a fever, you feel rubbish like a flu, but you don't get really, really bad and you don't die. And then as time goes, and then as you get even older, as you get to sort of adolescence and to adult, what happens is when you get malaria and the mosquito bites you, you don't even feel it really. You don't have a fever, you don't feel unwell, but you just have malaria in your bloodstream the whole time. And that's fine, and that's how people live. The problem is when you leave that area. When you leave that area, because you're not being bitten with malaria all the time, like you were before, you lose that immunity quite quickly. Largely, most of it's gone, mostly within a year, certainly within 3 years, it's basically gone. So you can't rely on it anymore. So you are not the same as what you were when you left, or your relatives who still stayed there. And I think it's important that I often say to people is that this is a very logical place to think about. It's like if there's a very logical thought to say, I was born there, I lived there for so long, my relatives are there, they don't take malaria tablets, so why should I? And that's a very logical starting point, and it makes sense. It's just that it's not what happens in life, and because of the human body and how immunity works. And so just to demonstrate Nigeria, so this is from the World Health Organization, and basically it just shows how much malaria is present. So this is the idea of parasite prevalence. So basically what in red, very dark red, is about 80%. So this is what proportion of people, what percentage of people have malaria in their bloodstream at any one time. So the highest being very dark red, about 80%. So it just shows that there's just lots and lots of malaria around, and the risk is very high. And if I look at the bottom there, if you can see estimated cases, last year there was about almost 70 million cases in Nigeria. Unfortunately, 180,000 deaths. The reality is that there's a lot of malaria, a lot of cases. One, because, as we said, the mosquito loves the area. And two, because of the big population of Nigeria, of course, as well. So you're just going to get lots and lots of cases, and it's the #1 country for malaria in the world, accounting for 25% of cases. And it's possible that you could be bitten with a mosquito that has malaria every day, every other day, depending on where you are. So the risk of traveling there and getting malaria is very high. And this is just a chart of the four most common countries that we see people have traveled to in my hospital and caught malaria, and all these are high risk, and we recommend having anti-malarials. A few more slides, and then I'll be able to stop. This is just a chart of the number of malaria cases in the UK over the last sort of 15 years or so, or almost 20 years. There's a little bit of dip during COVID, you can see there, and then a bit of a peak afterwards. But really, what we realize is that we haven't moved the dial at all. It's been pretty much the same, despite a lot of really good guidelines and advice. And I think that's really our fault, because for a long time the medical profession has said, people should go to travel clinics, and and that's perhaps what we'd describe maybe as the best advice, but they're very difficult to access, they're expensive, and it really is just, it's more, it's not working, quite frankly. And I think that's because we've done a bad job in connecting to the communities and speaking directly and making things easier for people. And that's what part of what I'm trying to do today and other places, to say that actually, we need to meet people where they are and make things easy. And it's their help, it's not about us. And so this is a slide just about some of the common antimalarials, for example. It's not medical advice that we want people to take away. The medical advice is individualized, but I wanted to get you a little bit of a feel of what these tablets look like, just so you've got an idea in your head. Now, the tablets are more than 90% effective against malaria, so they are very effective preventing malaria. It's always good to sleep under a net as well. But we understand that's difficult. You have to make sure there's no holes, and there's some resistance to the mosquito. It's very difficult in biting covering up. The first drug is doxycycline. That's the one I use. It's once a day. You take it for a few days before you go, and it just helps you to get used to it, and also, that it doesn't cause you any problems. If it does, you can always have time to then find something else. But you must take for 28 days afterwards. That's because the malaria exits the liver into the bloodstream for the 28 days after you've been infected. So you do need to take it afterwards. But it's the one I take because it protects you against a whole bunch of other things as well. Skin infections, chest infections, other infections. It's even good for acne. We don't use it in pregnancy or children, and it does have some side effects. For example, it can, if you don't have it with breakfast and food and sit upright after you've had it with lots of water, then you can get a bit of stomach upset, and that is real. And sometimes it can affect you with sunlight as well. So there's a real side effects. The drugs do have side effects. I'm not here to kind of undermine that, and it's important. It's an important concept because one of the things often is we're giving you medicine when you're well to stop you from getting sick. And if they work, you don't get sick. So that's a good thing. But you can still get side effects. And so it's understandable why people don't want to take it because, like, well, I took it and because you didn't get that bad outcome, the main memory is some of the side effects that might have happened but it's just trying to show that it is really important and I think the side effects are warranted by the risk and how bad malaria can get. And I just wanted to just give you an idea that this is the one I use, also because it's very cheap. So for an 8-week trip, you can spend less than £20 per person and be fully protected. There are two other drugs here, mefloquine and malarone, which you can again get in the UK. Mefloquine is popular sometimes because it's once a week, but this is the one that people may have heard of that can give you funny dreams, and it in very, very rare circumstances it can give you a psychiatric reaction. So we don't, it's only if people feel happy about that, and it's particularly good in pregnancy, but that's an option. It's more expensive, but not overly expensive. But the most expensive one is malarone, that does cost a lot of money. There's two drugs together combined. That one sometimes is popular. It's once a day, but you stop it for 1 week afterwards because it acts against the liver stage of malaria, and it doesn't have many side effects really. And you may have heard of vaccine. The vaccine is not for travelers. And just want to show you you can access these online, at your own leisure. There are many websites, Boots, Pharmacy for You. I'm not advocating any particular website. I just use this one because it's one I've written because it's one I use, but I have no affiliation to any of these, companies. But if you just type in pharmacy, it'll take you to your page here. You'll see anti-malaria is the number one thing on the left side. You can then pick your anti-malarial and it will go through, ask you medical questions, make sure it's appropriate for you. You can see doxycycline, one we use, is a sort of 20p per tablet, and they can deliver it to your door in time for your travels. So it is accessible, and I think we need to make things easier for people. And probably look, ideally, if you want to go travel to it, that's great, perfect, please do. But if you're not able to, please do protect your family, yourself, and your families. But please do, if you do feel unwell after you come back from holiday, please, with a fever, for example, please go to accident emergency. You do need to be tested for malaria, even if you're taking the tablets perfectly. Even if you've been diagnosed with COVID or flu. Unfortunately, the last few deaths in the UK from malaria have been people who have tested positive for flu or COVID. And you can see how that happened. So they come back, they're feeling well. They've got a diagnosis that explains the fever, but then unfortunately they've also had malaria at the same time, and then they died. And also, you can get hepatitis and typhoid vaccine free on the NHS. You should be able to access that through your GPs, and please do that. And then lastly, as I said, this is not a reason to not travel. I very much encourage it, to travel safely and to enjoy your trip. And all we want is that you come back and you and your family have a really good trip, and that we don't have to see you in the hospital. And thank you very much. I'll stop the slide there.
Thank you so much. I mean, Dr. Dedra, I mean, that's really very helpful and really very educative. I know there will be questions, and I also have a few questions, I mean, to start with. But before we start taking the questions, let's quickly have a brief interlude. So control room. Doctor, you might want to shut down the PowerPoint, the slides. Yes, thank you.
Choose which space your bricks of Barakah will build. Old Kent Road Mosque in the heart of London needs your urgent support. Donate your share now to invest in your akhirah. Rebuild the house of Allah and support our growing community. Phase 1 has been completed and £3 million is needed to complete the next phase. Stack your sadaqah with bricks of Barakah. Donate today by visiting launchgood.com/bricks of Barakah.
Yes, Jazakumullah khairan for reminding us about the rebuild of the Old Kent Road Mosque. The project is still ongoing. We are working on phase 2 plus. You know, one of the ways by which people can contribute to the project is through the bricks of Barakah, as has been mentioned in the clip. You know, I mean, we are working on the brick stage now. One brick is £100. I mean, you can donate as many bricks as you can. You know, you can go and do this on Launch Good for anyone who wish to, or if you want to donate directly into the account of the association, you can do that as well. You know, we continue to need your assistance, everyone who is listening from every part of the world. It's our mosque, is the Mosque of Allah, and we need to do this together, inshallah. All those who have contributed towards the project to where we are now, may Allah reward you. We know that Allah will reward you abundantly both here in this world and in the hereafter. But please continue to donate towards the project, and we pray that Allah will assist us to complete the project in our lifetime, inshallah. Now let's take some questions before perhaps maybe we'll come to back to donations. Dr. Dedra, thank you so much for your presentation. At the last end, you talked about the fact that there's no vaccination for travelers. I mean, in the past, I used to know that in Nigeria, they said they have vaccination for children. I mean, malaria vaccination for children. I wanted to ask, I mean, do adults also have vaccination? Because you find in the UK, for example, flu vaccines, people are really ready to take it. They take it all the time. I take it all the time, and it works. But these anti-malaria tablet, you take them for such a very long time. And sometimes, what's the situation? Malaria has been around for a very long time. So I thought perhaps maybe through research, there should be vaccination for it. I mean, or is it because it is a parasite? Why is there no vaccination for malaria?
It's a brilliant question, and if I could solve that, I'll be a multi-millionaire, and I wish I could. But it's a great question, and it's multifaceted. But one is that it is a parasite. It's much more complicated, and it changes and mutates, and it's very difficult to, and it takes a long time to get immunity. And there are different strains as well. So you might have malaria immunity to one strain, but doesn't mean you get to a different strain. Also, as we said, even people who are getting malaria very constantly, actual clinical malaria, often it takes a long time to get the kind of immunity that you don't have a problem. And and even then, you might lose that immunity very quickly compared to other vaccines. And it's a very, very clever parasite, it's a very, very clever thing. It's changed. I mean, I imagine people on the call and people who have friends and family who have sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease. And the reason why that's so common from sub-Saharan Africa is because of malaria, because sickle cell trait protects you against malaria. So it's an advantage to have that because there was so much malaria around. And we do have, we do have two current licensed vaccines by WHO, recently licensed. One of them is the worst ever vaccine that's ever been licensed in terms of how effective it is. The other one is better, and the better one is about 70 to 80% effective, but it's in young children, and there's evidence that we don't know how long it lasts. It may last a year or two. And then it may mean there's also some evidence that after that period, you might get more malaria afterwards because
Okay.
so and for that both vaccines are, I think, 4 doses over the course of more than a year. But the idea behind why they've been rolled out is not because really they're very effective for one person. It's on a big population level. To say that if you've got lots of people getting lots of malaria all the time, then even reducing it by somewhat is a good thing. And those vaccines took 30, 40 years to develop, really. But it's good that there is a pathway, but I don't think my feeling is it's unlikely that we're going to get a kind of one dose vaccine that's 100% effective to get rid of malaria. What I hope for, and what I think that Professor, you related to, is that we may have other options for people who are traveling there for often and for a long time. There is a switch towards things like potentially, again, these are very early stages of development, but maybe an injectable antimalarial that might last for 3 or 6 months.
Okay.
Those things are on the pipeline. But I hope that, I hope that was a kind of satisfactory answer, but I share your frustration. But
Thank you so much, for explaining that. Control room, do you have any questions from Dr. Dedra?
There's a question here. The person said, there was malaria in different regions of the world, and there appeared to have been success eradicating it in some regions. As a researcher, why do you think it has been difficult to achieve this in Africa and particularly Nigeria?
Wow, it's a brilliant question. These are proper, really sort of intellectual questions, which are great. So if you look back about 100 years ago, more or less, malaria is everywhere, including in this country. So, Henry VIII had malaria. We still have mosquitoes in this country that can transmit malaria around the coast of Essex and the south coasts. I think one very much is that the tropical environment is perfect for the mosquito, which is how you transmit it. So it's very, very difficult to get rid of the mosquito. One. So places where we eradicated it, one, it's much easier to get rid of the mosquito, which is what they did here. They got rid of the breeding grounds, the marshlands, and then you have to have a temperature, an average temperature of about 14 degrees for the mosquitoes to survive. So they won't survive winter, for example. So one is the environment for the mosquito is very, very good. Two, the mosquito, as we said earlier, is very, very good at it loves to bite people. And there's lots of malaria around in the people already. And lastly, part of where we have managed to eradicate malaria from some places where the mosquito is less good at passing on malaria once there's lots and lots of investment and development, and then that really is a key part of it as well, which is it takes a lot of money and time and effort to really, really get rid of the malaria. And some places have natural advantages and economic advantages. That's probably the bigger picture is as to why. But there was a big improvement going into sort of 2000, 2015. Since then, globally, it's sort of flatlined, and because of resistance as well, which is a real problem.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? I
We've
think
got some
Mariam
hands
has a
raised.
hand up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Assalamu
Go
alaikum.
on.
Thank you, Dr. Dedra, for coming tonight. This is Mariam Akinpeju speaking. I wanted to ask, you mentioned on one of your slides that Fansida is not a very good option to use. And I know that in childhood, when we visited Nigeria, that was something that was often given to us. Can you
Yes.
say a bit more about that, please?
No, that's an excellent question, and we do see people that come back in the hospital, and they bring out the plastic packet of Fansidar, as it's called, and say, "Well, I took this." So it's used for a different purpose than what we're advocating here. So obviously here we're advocating for people who live in the UK, who are going for a period of time to Nigeria, for example, or South Africa, and we want as good a protection as we can get. And we want them to really prevent anyone getting malaria because they're at such high risk. The thing about Fansida is that it's trying to reduce the risk of malaria on a population basis, to a whole bunch of, often that's to all the school children, for example, or all the pregnant women. And so it has to reach different sort of acceptability criteria. Whereas someone here we can say to them, take a tablet every single day. That's not going to be realistic to ask children to take a tablet every single day. And often the Fansida is usually a sort of free tablets. I think it's, I remember, I think it's 3 tablets in 3 days for a month, and then the following month, and that's the kind of regime. Even then, the resistance is spreading of Fansida as well. So resistance in malaria, very briefly, it tends to start off in Southeast Asia, make its way across trade routes classically from to like India and then to like East Africa. And actually, interestingly, it takes a long time for it to get from East Africa to West Africa, but it does happen. And so resistance is spreading as well, and it's a real problem. So even though it's often there's a different drugs that are being used more as well, such as atovaquone artesunate, is it an alternative? You may have seen that. And that's sort of looking to replace that. And again, this sort of thing I've mentioned earlier about the injectable for 3-6 months, particularly in places where there's what we call seasonal malaria, is kind of the next thing that people are trying to work on. But it's better than nothing. It does work to a degree, but it's variable. It certainly isn't by all means 100%. It's meant to kind of reduce the overall burden, if that makes sense.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just have a follow-up question. So, just in the same line with Fansida, obviously in Nigeria, a lot of people take combination medicines like Artemether-based kind of antimalarials. So, is the advice that actually what we're using for prophylaxis is very different from what is used for treatment in malaria in Nigeria?
Yeah. So the treatment is very different to the prophylaxis. So we wouldn't give that treatment. So which is often artemether, lumefantrine, Riamet, or a combination. Basically, that's that different trade name for the same combination, and that's what we use in the hospitals in the UK largely. They're not good as preventative treatment. Because they will be very expensive. It will be the combination drugs, if you use them for a long period of time, will have a lot of dangerous side effects potentially. So they're safe for 3 days, very safe, very, very safe. But if you took them for 10, 20 days, you're likely to get, for example, QT prolongation and heart rhythm problems and stuff like that. So you wouldn't use it for prevention. Sometimes people, yeah.
I was just going to be cheeky and ask one last question. Why is doxycycline an antibiotic but helps with the parasites?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, the antibiotics sometimes do have a clindamycin, for example, is another. They just interact. They just have different. I don't know what I can't remember exactly what the mechanism for doxycycline off my head is, but in terms of what it does to the parasite, even a lot of times we don't know. But several antibiotics do have antimalarial effects, like clindamycin, azithromycin as well. And doxy just does, and doxy is just an acceptable one that we tend to go for.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, and thank you, Dr. Mariam, for putting in those questions, which are also really very useful. I mean, Dr. Dedra, would you anti-malaria repellents, ointments that people use sometimes, would you recommend them? Can that one also, sometimes people don't want to take medications. I mean, I've tried it sometime when I buy those ointments, and when I want to go to bed at night, I rub them on and things like that. Do you recommend that? Is it?
So I think in terms of recommend, I mean, no, I think they're not going to be not reliable to any degree. Also, you have to have really you'd have to put DEET, 50% DEET, which overnight it'd be difficult. I mean, it's still good to apply these things for other things. So there are other diseases that, that other like day biting mosquitoes, like dengue, it's worth putting repellent on for dengue during daytime. And there's tick bites and there's other things like that and tsetse flies and things. But so daytime biting, applying DEET, sleeping under a net is good as well. But they're not replacements, unfortunately. So of course, like, and one thing I say to people is, look, I always advocate, it's your body, it's your family, it's your choice. And whatever happens, I will, if you come to the hospital, I will see you, I will treat you. I said less that might tell you off very respectfully and very, and just say the next time, please do these things. But yeah, the tablets are really are the best protection.
Thank you. Any more questions, control room?
Yeah, a couple of questions and comments. Somebody said, I grew up to accept that malaria medication should be bitter. So has it changed? That's their question.
So there is one famous one which is bitter, which is quinine. So that one we shouldn't be using anymore, thankfully. It is famous for being bitter, and it's the quinine is still it's tonic water. It's in tonic water, lemon bitter, gin and tonics. That's where it comes from. So like the British Raj, and they would have tonic water with quinine in there, and that's to prevent malaria. You have to drink a lot of it. But so you shouldn't be having the quinine anymore. That's probably a long time ago. We don't use so much of that. So hopefully the other stuff shouldn't you shouldn't have to come across that anymore.
Okay. This comment says drainage system in Nigeria is poor, creating a great environment for breeding. And I think that's in response to a question about why it's still in Nigeria. Then this question says, if for some reasons I am unable to take the anti-malaria medication before traveling, am I able to buy them in Nigeria or other African countries, or these are only available here in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I have to be honest, I would probably, if it was me, and I would go for the what's in the UK, which are verified. You can trust them to a degree. I mean, I'm not saying that in Nigeria, that you can't trust them, but there is kind of good evidence that some of the medications are not to the same standard and can be falsified, unfortunately. There's an estimate about 10%, which is very difficult to get data on this. But it's not that they're toxic generally, but it's more just like the quality of the drug is not to the high proportion, and so I guess it's a trust issue, isn't it? And I think for me as well, for peace of mind, I would recommend that you get it from here. I guess the only potential advantage is that it's cheaper out there. With the websites, they do deliver quite quickly, so hopefully, and I guess the wider hope of this is that eventually, I hope, well, I hope my dream is that I wouldn't need to I'd have to do this anymore, and that it becomes common knowledge in the community, so that when someone tells you I'm going to going to see my family in Lagos in a few weeks, so have you got your ticket, have you got your your travel insurance and etc., but have you got your anti-malarials? And it becomes common knowledge that everyone just sort of, it becomes part of the nature that is part of my travel. I just have to accept that this is part of it, is to keep myself safe and to go down that route. So I guess the short answer is that no, but it's is my advice. But I suppose you could give it a go. But we definitely do see people who are in the hospital who I've seen several of these who have gone and said I've taken these from abroad and and they've admitted. I'm yet to see someone personally who's told me directly, like, I've taken these malaria tablets every dose from the UK and got malaria. It does happen, but I've never come across it yet. Whereas I've seen lots of people bring back stuff from various places and still get malaria.
We've got a hand raised. Dr. Kazim.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much, our able doctor. So further to the question of our able moderator, it is can we encourage people to use nets if they fail to use the tablet, nets on their bed when they are about to sleep? Second question is that why do they isolate those who have the malaria in this country? Why? It is transferable.
It's a good question. I'll answer the second question first and then the first question. So they're not isolating you because you can transmit it. Because to transmit it, you have to be bitten by a mosquito, and then a mosquito needs to bite someone else. And like I said, they're not really present in only very rare places in the UK, and there hasn't been a local transmission for about 100 years. So the only other way to do it is to take your blood and inject someone, for example, which no one's going to do. So I think the reason they keep you in the hospital is not because necessarily the malaria, is that there may be another infection that you've traveled, that you could have another infection on board as well. For example, typhoid, which is transmissible to someone else. That might be the reason. I often, when I see people, I wouldn't necessarily keep them. If I've got a diagnosis of malaria and I don't think there's any other reason to suspect something else, then I wouldn't keep them in isolated. But it's not because of the malaria, but because of something else. At least that's what they should be doing. So you're completely right. You shouldn't transmit it. You don't need to worry about passing it on to your family or whatever. With regards to encouraging people to use bed nets, yeah, I mean it is, people try very hard. There's very good evidence that it does help, like prevent, and it helps mortality, particularly in high risk areas. I suppose it's just very difficult for people, isn't it? To every night. I remember doing it as a child. And sometimes it's been a while since I've had to do it, but it was a lot of headache. You have to tuck it in. You've got to look for the mosquito inside there. Is there a hole? And even the nets now, it's still a great idea. It's still very, very recommended. It's still one of the cheapest, best ways of saving lives ever. But I think we really should encourage people. But I think it's not a substitute for the antimalarials in a traveler. It's the bottom line.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Dr. Odedra. Two questions I want to, put across. Now, so, some people travel very frequently. In relation to, I want to talk about the cycles. Now, for example, you've gone to Nigeria, you've taken a cycle of the anti-malaria, then in another 2 months or so, you want to go again. Now, how often can one be repeating this cycle if you travel regularly? Because of side effects and also what this can cause.
No,
the second question is, the second question is, you mentioned typhoid when you were talking about this. Is there any interrelationship between malaria and, because hardly, although we don't live in Nigeria, but a lot of the time, I'm aware that when people are struck down with malaria and they go for tests, in 3 out of 5 cases, they will also diagnose typhoid together with it. Is it because the malaria has affected the immune system, so typhoid setting, or what is the relationship? Hardly will you find somebody who has gone for a test, he has malaria, they will also detect typhoid.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really great questions that are topical. So the typhoid question first. So when we have you can get both at the same time, but it's not as common as those numbers that you put there. It's particularly common in young children. It could be about 5% or so who might have both in the endemic setting. Certainly not 60%. I've never seen any numbers like that. But I think what it is probably the test they do for the typhoid is different to what we do here in the UK, or the best test. The best test is to take your blood when you come in and try and grow the typhoid in the blood and try and find and grow the bacteria itself. That's the best test because it's in there. I think the test they probably do in these settings very commonly is called a Vidal test. So it's more to look for antibody, and there's lots of problems with that test. It might be the only thing they can have, but it's very, very, we don't believe it here, rarely.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the testing that's probably the problem. So there's a slight crossover, but I think probably the bigger point is the testing that they're doing, and often then you end up treating because it's very difficult to find it. And then people who go in frequently, yeah, I mean, so the way I tackle that is two ways. I think one is we're here talking about general, travel. I think if you're going very often, it probably is worth you making that effort to go travel clinic one time and speaking to someone and getting a good view and basically having a proper conversation about yourself. Because you're going to be exposed to all kinds of things as well, and what is the best strategy for you. So one strategy could be, for example, if it's usually people that go frequently are adults. So doxycycline is a very safe antibiotic. It's been used, people use it for years and years and years for things like acne, and use it safely. So I'm not saying people should use it for malaria prophylaxis for years, but you can use it repeatedly. I remember last time I went, I was traveling for I think 4 or 5 months. And I took it every day, for 4 or 5 months, and it was completely fine. It was just more the make sure you have it with food, and you don't get sensitivity. So you can do that. The alternative is if you're going very, very frequent is, and again, this is not individualized advice. This is something that I think you should go for treatment travel clinic. Is at that point you might say, okay, I will be very, very active and test and treat as a strategy. But I'm not advocating that for us, only for a small proportion who are going, maybe living there the whole time, because then you're just like, okay, you have to kind of do something. Either way, if you get sick in Nigeria or when you come back, you do need to test for malaria, and you need to make sure you get treatment either here or there, and that's important.
Thank you so much. I mean, we have really been educated tonight. And also, I mean, people have been made aware. Perhaps maybe when traveling to Nigeria, we'll take this more seriously now, because people tend to take it for granted. Sometimes people take, sometimes people don't. Now, with this information, I mean, I believe it will be fresh in the minds of everyone who's listening tonight so that we look after ourselves. Prevention is always better than cure. Thank you so much, I mean, Dr. Dedra, for your time. I mean, you came to the mosque on Sunday. People benefited, and you have also sacrificed your time to be with us tonight on Oh You Who Believe, over an hour now. We thank you so much. We pray that, I mean, Allah will count this as an act of, I mean, good work for you and put it in your mizan. Thank you so much. We hope that we can count on your support anytime we need you to come back on this platform. We hope, inshallah, you will answer us. I can still see a hand up there, but I was really pushing to round off. Control room.
Yes, it's just that somebody sent a question, and then and there's another one there. The person said, if it is not transferable, like you said, does that mean that there is a misunderstanding of how to deal with it within the medical practitioners, and what is being done to correct this?
Yeah, it's a good. I think probably the main thing is that most practitioners probably haven't had you have to imagine that most practitioners in the UK, you might get one lecture or two lectures on malaria, in your career, and that's okay if you work in, Blackpool. And you don't see any cases. You might see one case every 2, 3 years. I work here, I see loads. And I think it's more the second part, which is that there could be a second infection as well, and they don't want that to, in the same way that if you went to hospital for something else, you don't want to catch something, from someone else, that they're worried about something that you might also have typhoid or something on top. And I think part of it is, you're right, there is an education element about that, and I try my best as well. And I think particularly if it's something that the community finds really quite a problem, then I could prioritize that a bit higher up, in the kind of what I go for when I speak to all my colleagues and education. Right now, my main focus is if people come to hospital, that the treatment they get is as soon as possible to get so that the malaria is treated better, they get the best kind of clinical treatment, and the infection control, which is what we're talking about here, is a little bit lower, because I think we need to focus more on making sure they get the first dose of anti-malaria as soon as possible, which means that you get better experience and things. But it's a fair point. They're trying to be safe to everyone, but they may not have the clinical experience to say this is just malaria. I'm not worried about typhoid as well.
Are we done?
The
Control room?
second question was just a comment, I think, in support of what he has said about the fansida. So I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I mean, and everyone who has made contribution, ask questions. Before we go, as we normally do, our OE who believe for tonight will be from Quran chapter 4, verse 71. Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O ye who believe, Khuzu hizrakum, take your precautions. You know, this relates to what we have been discussing tonight. You can check it up in Quran chapter 4, 71. You know, Muslims are advised, I mean, they say, a believer, don't rely only on dry belief. You know, take your precautions. The Quran says, Khuzu hizrakum, make sure that you take your precautions. And the Prophet also says that tie your camel and then rely on God. You know, so we have to take the necessary steps all the time, as we have heard. You know, don't just have been say that, well, you believe in God and you don't take your anti-malaria when you are traveling to a malaria zone like Nigeria. Khuzu hizrakum. Make sure that you take necessary precautions and then rely on God. So may Allah continue to increase us in good health. We thank Dr. Aldedra very well. And I'll now be handing back over to the control room to sign us out. Until next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mariam?
Apologies.
I think.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much to our guest speaker and Professor Moshood Badri. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly and add it to your scale of good deeds. We have now come to the end of today's session, and I leave you on the care of Allah, and I say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.